Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
That's the company we're going to talk about. And she's also the host of a great podcast that I've had a chance to listen to. And it's called Coffee with Romina. And we're going to talk about that podcast as well. Romina, she holds the president chair for FSCJ SHRM student chapter. And recently, she launched the Northeast Florida Negotiation Club. Now, Romina has a very interesting story. She moved to America at just 17 years old by herself, intending to pursue her American dream. And her accomplishments talk about her stubbornness on her goals continuously. Often, Romina will talk about her American journey, and it's been a roller coaster, but Romina has a power to keep a positive attitude over every situation. And she likes to analyze everything with the, how can I make this better? And what can I learn from this mindset? So Romina, I'm thrilled to have you on the show this morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine for being here.
Excellent. So tell us about what you came to the United States at the age of 17. Where did you come from? And what made you decide to make that move?
Yeah, so my relationship, I should say, with America began in 2005 when me and my family first came here. We were lucky winners of the DV visa program, the diversity visa program from USCIS, which the foreign citizens call it the American lottery. So when I say people like my mom won the American lottery, they think that she won money. No, you guys, we won the chance to come to America and get green cards. But because they had business back home and we did a lot of back and forth, I just kind of got like a taste of American life and I really wanted to be a part of it. So I keep insisting and bothering my parents that I wanted to come here. But, at 17, you cannot live by yourself in America because technically you're still not an adult yet. So the best medium for us was for me to live in a host family at age 17. So I did finish my high school here and then I continued my life in America ever since. I haven't ever looked back. I know 17, thinking about it right now, I'm still trying to figure out if my parents had enough of me or they love my brother more or they just supported me on this crazy decision. But I'm super grateful they did because my life has drastically changed since I moved here, honestly.
Really? So which country was this that you came
Albania.
From? Albania.
Yes,
okay.
It's a very small country. It's about 2.5 million in population, which is a very, very small country.
Mm-hmm. Are your parents still there, or did they come?
They moved actually to America 3 years after I did. So we actually, all of us live in Florida right now, my parents and my brother. So we got closer. I got closer to them about 5 years ago because before I used to be in Illinois or in Georgia. And then when they moved here, they moved to Florida directly. So I joined them in Florida 5.5 years ago now.
Right. So was it everything you expected to come to the United States? Or were there surprises?
A lot of surprises on the way, I should definitely say. I thought I knew English first and foremost, but then I moved to Chicago and everybody would talk so fast. And I did not know English. So I had to get used to the fast talking, to the daily talking. Like all in my exams, I would ace my exams. And I remember I had a marketing teacher in my senior year. And one time he did this extra credit and I got like 120%. I was the only one in the class. And he's like, how in the world did you get 120%? Did you cheat or are you just very shy and don't talk? So once he started listening to me talk, he realized that I just had a lot of like language barriers to talk, but I knew everything in paper. So it was a lot to overcome at first, especially the first 2 years, I would say. That was like a big learning curve. But then once I started hanging out with a lot more Americans, because like as an immigrant, I would still click with the immigrants a lot. But when I moved to Florida, I started making a lot more American friends, my English has become so much better that sometimes I'm like, I wish I would have done this before, so I can fast forward the whole process of learning English much faster too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I learned Spanish in Florida. So I actually lived in Dominican Republic for a year in 95.
Yeah.
And then I moved to South Florida, and I really wanted to get good at Spanish. So I started to hang around Spanish-speaking people. And only when I did that did I become really good at Spanish. Before that, it was a big struggle. So
yes, it's really a thing. Like, it's really a thing. Like, once you start practicing it, it becomes much easier. Like, I learned Spanish watching telenovelas. And, like, my brother's girlfriend, she's from Mexico. So we speak Spanish sometimes. And I just feel a lot better once you start practicing it. Because that's how you'd be able to learn also. Or if you say something wrong, you'd be able to say, oh, I constructed the sentence the wrong way, for example. So if I say it this way, it'll make a lot more sense. That practice is absolutely very important.
Yes, for sure. So you run a sales company and you do consulting. Tell us about, how did you get into sales and negotiations? As a young person, what was the appeal for you?
That's a very good question. Me and sales have a long relationship, I would say. Like I mentioned earlier, my parents ran a business, and my father back home would actually sell construction items, because construction works very different compared to America. Like, we build it with bricks, with cements, with iron elements, so it goes a lot more. So I remember on summertime, I used to go with my dad B2B, business to business, and he would negotiate brick prices up to the penny, like pre-production, post-production, pre-transportation, post-transportation. Try to get the deposit. So I would see him negotiate to the tiny penny, and sometimes he'd be like, here, you just go do this now. And I'm like, okay, but like, I'm like 14 years old, and I'm 5'3". I'm like 14, and I'm talking to like the owner of the construction site, like, are you sure about this? So he would always push me, and even when they were business fairs, he would always say, hey, you're not going to school tomorrow, you're coming with me to the business fair. I need you to like just keep the stand busy for me. So he always got me involved in the perception, and whenever I moved to America, I started working car sales, and I didn't realize I learned so much while the whole experience with my father, with his business. I didn't realize that I learned so much. So when it came to car sales, like, my very first car sales were 2 cars at the same time, because I would just build connections with people. Like, I remember the brother came because he wanted to buy a car, and the sister just started liking me so much, and she's like, I've been waiting for like to buy a car for a while, so how about we just buy it now with you, since you're just very helpful towards everything. So once I worked car sales, I've also worked door-to-door sales, or like I should call it how the business world calls it, the business-to-customer sales, the fancy world. No, I'll like knock on your door and try to sell you stuff. Right. But I also, throughout the whole time, of course, like inside sales too, but throughout the whole time, because I got introduced to the sales world at such a young age, I built that resilience, and I built that mindset that if I get a no, it's not going to ruin my day. I'm going to analyze it to, how can I get a yes? What did I do bad from this? And how can I improve my whole sales funnel? Therefore, that now I'm able to teach my students, especially with the sales course that I launched, and also with a negotiation club, which is an institute based in London, and we teach students internationally how to be able to negotiate, and we have them like negotiate with one another, and then open the stage. Okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? So I've been in a part of the sales and negotiation world, I would say, since I'm 14 years old. But when I moved to America, that's when I actually worked sales without like my father's shadow, I would say. But it's something that it's been a part of my life, my whole life, I would say, pretty much at this point.
Right. So you teach sales and negotiation. Obviously, there's a need for this, because I think a lot of people misunderstand the way they're supposed to act and the way they're supposed to think. And you talk a lot about mindset when it comes to sales. So tell us some of the improper mindsets that people have, and what you try to do to help them have a better mindset.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I want everybody to know that it's law of averages. It's, for example, if you have 100 leads, not all 100 leads are going to end up in sales. So it's okay. And another way how I like to process this is, the better you get at it, the more you practice, of course, you're going to, like, everything is going to be second nature. So how I teach sales myself is you go through leads, decision makers, pitches, and sales. And throughout 1001 tactics out there, because there are so many sales books, I decided to take the best used practices and be able to implement them. For example, going from leads to decision makers, it's absolutely very important for you to have an amazing icebreaker to shatter that ice and become like a friend or a partial friend at the beginning. And then start creating those personal relationship. I don't mean to be buddy buddies, but like you guys get to know each other, and make sure you also qualify the DMs, skip the gatekeeper, because you might end up hurting yourself if you give too much information to your gatekeeper. And then the second bracket, I teach it as what do you need to do towards, your discovery phase, what tactics to use, what not to use. And then from pitches to sales, like Jones effect. Not a lot of people practice Jones effect. So I give best tips and tricks of how you can also build the Jones effect factor in your whole sales funnel, and how you'd be able to learn from your own experience the best, what works, what doesn't work. And also try to realize what Jones effect gives on your mindset, as well as the power of the 3 no's, for example. You definitely want the customer to tell you 3 no's, because if they tell you yes right away, they feel like they didn't really have a say in their choice. But if they give you 3 no's and you're still able to actually show them that the product and the services that they're about to purchase, it's what they want, and you show them the features, then they know they gave 3 no's and they still were able to get the whole information they could in order for them to make the final decision. So tactics like that are super important, and a lot more tactics, but those are some of the highlights. But that's how I teach sales, and throughout the whole system, your mindset, going back to the mindset, not only is going to be able to help you get the sales mindset in the right place, but actually personally, because career and personal life, we're still one person at the end of the day, you'll be able to kind of see things from a different perspective, and even in your daily life. So you're not going to take a lot of things personal. For example, you're not going to get upset with the first, like, not so happy news that you might get over an email or a text message or anything like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's about relationship building. And obviously the gatekeeper you mentioned, you don't want to be disrespectful to that person, but it's a different relationship than the one you're trying to build with the actual decision maker. You have to recognize who's the gatekeeper, who's the decision maker.
Absolutely.
And you treat them a little bit different, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and why we say we treat them a little bit different, again, absolutely very respectful, but I'll give you a very important example to why you should not give too much information to the gatekeeper. So let's say, look, I'm your secretary, right? And you need to buy a new laptop. And you're like, hey, can you do research for me? I have a very busy schedule. I need you to find me the 5 best computers in the market and give me the price at the end of, at the end. So I do my research and I show you 5 examples. Now, when you look at these examples, guess what? Your mind is going to look at the price, the very first thing that is going to look at. You're not going to look at the features, the RAM, the hard drive, the Intel processor, nothing of those nature. You're going to look at the price, and you see the highest price, you're going to be like, yeah, no, I'm not spending that much money. There's other options out there. But guess what? Now, that higher price might have been the best investment of your life, because it's going to be the double or the triple best processor than the price that is also just $100 less than that. That's why it's factors like that, because gatekeeper is not also very emotionally attached to the service or the products that are going to be used at the end of the equation. So that's when I say you might hurt yourself by giving too much information to the gatekeeper. Yes,
that makes sense. Totally makes sense. So referral system is really important for people in sales. Why is it important? And how do you build a strong referral system?
Yes, and I'm very glad you actually asked me that question, because here's the thing. Once you sell something and once you already worked with your client, you already have built an impulse. They're already excited for the whole process. So buyer's remorse, it's a thing. You actually want to follow up with the client or the customer to make sure everything that they purchased, it's very satisfying to what they were expecting. Because sometimes also the delivery phase, from the sales process to the delivery phase, it might be immediate. It might be like an item you just purchased, or it might be something that needs to be installed or delivered. So you definitely want to do a follow-up call. And while that impulse is still built higher with the client that you actually just sold, you make sure that you still go ahead and answer 5 or 10 questions that they might have, and they know that you are the friend on the inside that they can actually go ahead and give a call whatever issues they might have. But guess what? This client also have friends and has coworkers that might be looking exactly for the same thing. since the impulse is built so high, they will be your biggest advocate towards selling what you have to sell, but doing the whole process for you. So whenever they go ahead and say, like, they might have a friend that is looking for the exact same thing, be like, hey, I know, look, he actually was able to help me out really, it was a really easy process, got a great deal. Here's his number. Just go ahead and contact him. So they already built the impulse and you don't have to start from scratch. And these are leads that you're not your whole marketing platform might be attracting this person. So this is an extra lead that you got. And the conversion for this type of leads, it's almost 100% all the time, because half of the job, it's already done. Like most of the time they're like, I want what my friend got. Just get to the bottom of it. So this is why referral system is actually super important for you to continue the relationship with your clients as well.
Yes, right. So your consulting firm is called 6-7 Radius. Yes. How did you come up with that name? And tell us what the company does.
Yeah, so the company name has two meanings behind it. The first meaning is I'll watch your 6 while you shoot for your lucky number 7. Number 7 and number 13 are the two of the most used lucky numbers. I go with number 7 myself, so it's I'll watch your 6 while you shoot for your lucky number 7, because it's a relationship that is built with a client. I'm not looking for a one-time transaction, one and done, because that's just not my personality to begin with. Like I still have relationship with people I sold cars like years ago, because I just love making new friends. So it's always a partnership. I definitely will have your back no matter what, any time of the day. All my clients, all my friends have my phone number at any time. I'm the person that will text you or will call you right away if there's an issue. So that's where the 6-7 Radius comes out of. As well as 6-7, it's also my birthday, but that was completely a coincidence for it, because my mentality behind it is I got your 6 while you shoot for your lucky number 7. So I got your 6 Radius while you shoot for your 7.
That makes sense. So you do consulting. So do you go into a company and try to overhaul their whole sales strategy, or what do you do with that company?
Yeah, so 6-7 Radius is actually, it has kind of many branches. Number one and foremost, we are on a podcast right now. I am in the podcasting world, so it is a podcast production company. The second one is we work with different clients to make sure their PR is on point, and then be able to go ahead and help them how they would be able to increase their sales overall. One of the most recent clients that I was actually able to help out was just their sales commission structure, because they were seeing their sales professionals not really be very motivated towards, pushing for more sales at every month. So we're able to do a sales training on that perspective, as well as look at their commission structure and say, are you overpaying? Are you mispaying? What can you change around the commission structure so this way you'll be able to motivate your sales professionals? Because I will be able to put the sales professional hat on as well as the business hat on, because I've been in both worlds. But a business person has been only in the business perception, does not know how the sales professional really concepts the whole commission, what motivates them, what demotivates them. So things of the nature, that's where we'll be able to come in and actually be able to help out with everything.
Right. And so you mentioned you actually help these companies to start podcasts as well.
Correct. That is another thing that we do on 6-7 Radius.
Yeah. And what is the advantage for a company to start a podcast? Like, why should a typical company start a podcast?
Yeah. So let's start with the basics. A podcast is absolutely very important. You might have a PR standpoint. You might have social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the social medias out there. Here's the thing though. You put your podcast, your episode, even if you do like one episode a month, like the lowest investment that you want to make, one episode a month. Here's the thing. You put it on your hosting platform, which can be any type of platform. There's a lot of options out there. You put it in one platform, it gets automatically fused to Spotify, Apple, Stitchers, Podbean, Podchaser, like all the options out there. You'll get automatically fused. Well, guess what? All these podcasts, all these episodes end up in the World Wide Web, right? So when somebody Googles your name, guess what's going to come up now? Or when somebody Googles your business, these options are going to come up, because SEO is going to kick in and be able to grow your exposure right there, compared to just a social media post that is just one time there and that's it.
Right.
So that's another great way to see how it'll help you on growing exposure, not only being able to because podcasting is an intimate experience, have an intimate experience with the listener, so they know exactly who you are, what you do, and they can kind of tell if they want to work with you or not. And you can also tell if you want to work with the audience or not, because we can be picky on our clients too. That is a privilege we have as business owners.
Yes. Should most people try to monetize their podcast, or is it mostly for branding, would you say?
I would say it's two ways. Number one is why you're starting your podcast. The reason why I started my podcast, for example, it was because of a little runaway. I started a podcast because I had anxiety, and I started as a hobby, and then I later started creating a branding and monetizing behind it. If you have a message really strong that you feel like it needs to go to a bigger audience, I would say start a podcast. But if you want to start a podcast to correlate it with your business, you definitely want to put some branding, strategies behind it and a whole organizing strategies behind it. So you don't just mumble episodes here and there, but you actually have a plan with it. So it goes really like, what's the reason why you started? And another thing too is you're the boss of the podcast, so you can always re-strategize it and re-change the whole structure of it.
Yeah. So you mentioned you had anxiety. That's why you started the podcast. When did you realize you had, I don't know if I should say severe anxiety, but like enough anxiety that you needed to make some sort of a change in your life? When did that happen? And what do you think the cause of that was?
So the cause of that, actually, it's a very interesting one. I was divorced at 23, and I thought I processed my whole, anxiety and everything. I let go of that part of my life. And then I started working sales, and I was working for a big security system sales. And I was listening to stories left and right, how people were breaking in and everything was just a mess. I need camera because of this. But I didn't realize that I had PTSD that I had not, coped with. In 1996, Albania was in a civil war. So I started having flashbacks, and I would ask my parents, say, hey, like, did this story really happen? I don't know if it was a dream or if it was a flashback. And they're like, how in the world do you remember? You were like 4 or 5 years old at this time. And I'm like, I remember very good, like a guy pulling his gun to dad, like stopping us. Like I would say like exact stories. So it came to a point that I just could not control it anymore. Like I would go in my building and my heart rate would go like 150, 160, like my Apple Watch will tell me. And to pile that on top of everything, like I said, I've been in the sales world for quite forever. And I'm confident that I know what I'm talking about because also I was always one of the top salespeople. I was helping their project management and new marketing campaigns, but I could never get promoted because I was just very good at where I was towards my productivity. So kind of everything just piled up. I did therapy on it. I even started anxiety medications, which it took me about 2 to 3 months to say even yes to that because I am a little stubborn, but I also did not want to accept the part that I had anxiety because that's just not an easy thing for people to even accept it. So I started taking medications, and then I would always listen to podcasts. So I was like, I'm sure somebody else has been in this stage, not necessarily like with a whole flashbacks issue, but I'm sure somebody has been in this stage that you have so much more to offer, but the corporate America does not allow you to have that. As much as we say upward mobility, like I even got told one time that I was like, oh, it's okay that you didn't get promoted. I waited 7 years to be a manager. You still have 5 more years to go. So I started, my talents started being measured by the time. And I was like, this is just not fair. I know I can do more. So I was like, let me just actually reach out to a bigger audience. Let me talk to professionals. Does everybody go through this? Is this something that we just keep it on the down low and we don't talk openly about it? And came to find out that is something that actually really happens. It is not easy to jump, upward mobility in corporate America. And through interviews, it's really getting more knowledge to the audience, as well as me personally. I've learned so much throughout the process that a couple of months later, I decided to take a leap of faith and resign from my corporate job and start working as a marketing project manager. It's a position that I very well loved. And the factor for me even getting that position actually was the podcast, because I don't have the license yet, but they're like, you do this podcast, we've been listening to your interviews, they're amazing, so we want to offer you this job. And then COVID happened. So I was left with nothing. And that's when, again, I had to re-strategize everything. Okay, I'm like, my anxiety is cured. I don't have to deal with that issue anymore. I'm not listening to stories left and right. I don't feel like I have, the ceiling on top of my head that I cannot break through. So what do I do from here? So I contained and I piled all my knowledge, and I was like, let me launch on my own. And it's been a journey ever since.
Right. How do you find guests to come on your show?
Absolutely.
You've had some amazing guests, and I think you just recorded your 100th episode, which is amazing.
So we actually
How do you get all those great guests?
Yeah, we actually have enough material to keep us till August. I just decided to do the 100th episode, something different, and I have one of my very good friends, which is a part of the American Next podcaster. She's a host on like 5 podcasts. I decided to have her interview me for the 100th episode, but the guest, honestly, is strictly through LinkedIn, number one, and creating that amazing relationship with my guests, because you never know who people know. So once somebody has that amazing experience, I would ask them, do you have any of your friends, for example, that think might be a really good guest on the show? And they would, like, I remember one time, one of my guests literally emailed over 100 people, blast email everybody, say, hey, I just got interviewed on Romina's show, give it a listen, her podcast, if you want to be a guest, let her know she's looking for new guests. And now I'm not even hunting people to be my guest anymore. Like, I'm getting like people coming into me because I build their reputation and the podcast quality talks for itself. So yes. I don't know when was last time I actually reached out to somebody to be a guest on my show, because it's all referrals now.
That's great. That's awesome. So you changed the name recently to Coffee with Romina. What was it called before? Why did you change the name?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I started the podcast because like a little runaway. So I had this amazing idea of a podcast, and I made this amazing logo, which we can make fun of, okay? Like, it's a picture of me, and I put RM Podcast, and like that wasn't enough, I put FL in there too. So I put RM Podcast FL, because I was just so impatient that I just wanted to like have something to go for it and just do it. So I talk about PR and marketing a lot, and I've been super busy. So I'm like, I always wanted to change the name of my own podcast. So it was just a matter of time for me to change the name of my podcast. And the conversations are kind of like having a coffee with a professional. And I always said that. It's, hey, listen here, it's having coffee with a professional. Let me be your voice and ask the questions that you want to know the answers to. So I love coffee. And I was like, Coffee with Romina it is.
It makes sense. Totally makes sense. So you can teach people how to monetize their podcast if they want to. When does that become a good idea? And how does someone go about starting to monetize their podcast?
That's a very great question. I'm actually doing a free webinar on this too on March 31st, because a lot of people don't know how to monetize their podcast. So that's why first and foremost, we need to make sure that your mission, vision, because at the end of the day, you are, a Fortune 1 company, you as an individual. So we need to make sure who you are gets transmitted through the podcast as well. If you do have a business that you definitely want to correlate with your podcast, or if you might have like a passion on the side, if you really love fitness, for example, you want to get to start training others on how to get like a really great, healthier diet, then you can start podcasting about that. And just by adding a call to action on your podcast, or just the way you treat your pre-production, during production, and post-production of every single episode, will be able to start monetizing your podcast. But every business is different, and that's why I would be able to build strategy for every podcast. If you ask me, can you monetize every single podcast? Most likely not, because there are some podcasts out there, they're just fun. But you'd be surprised because those fun, like there's a podcast with like 5 really good guys, like, they're just friends, they're just chilling, just being silly throughout the whole thing. At first, they couldn't be able to monetize it, but they're so silly, like companies started being like, hey, if you just mention our name in the podcast, because you have thousands of people listen to it, we'll give you free stuff. So now they have like a whole free studio, and all they do is just mention the name of the real estate real estate that is able to offer their studio. So you might need to change a little tweaks here and there to be able to monetize it, but that's something you can absolutely do. But it might not be monetizable if, as it is right now, but you might need to just tweak some things around.
Yeah, right. And you need to have a certain size of audience, right, to really monetize it. If you've only got, 40, 50 listeners, you're probably not going to monetize it. How do you grow your audience? Is it just producing consistent, great content? Is that the number one way that you grow your audience?
Well, I want to actually correct a misconception in the podcasting world for monetizing it. Even if you don't have a big audience, you can still monetize your podcast, because your downloads are people that are listening to it. Now, it's who's your client? Is your client your audience, or is your client your guest and your guest's company? Because a lot of times, if your audience is it's your client, then that's when you need a really huge audience in order to be able to monetize the podcast through an ad or through everything. But a lot of people misconcept that because they think the only way how you'd be able to monetize a podcast is through an ad. If you get somebody to sponsor it, to say, hey, like, you know, clicks per million, like, hey, play this ad on your podcast, we'll give you $20 per million for 1,000 downloads, right? And a lot of podcasters, whenever they're really new, there might still be at that 1,000 or 2,000 or even 10,000 downloads, so they don't have a great reach. But here's the thing, if you have interviewing style, which a lot of people tend to miss, one of my clients, for example, his podcast is strictly interviewing people, just want to share like a story about their client, like about their leaders, one leader in their life that said something or did something that changed them long term. And what he's able to do to monetize his podcast is that he gets a hold and he reaches this really high executives. And now he's like, hey, I'm really good on, succession planning I'm really good on helping, strategic planning. Does your company, or do you know anybody that really is in need of such services? Sometimes I might say yes, sometimes I might say no. But guess what? That icebreaker, you already talked to the decision maker, kind of going back to sales. You already skipped the gatekeeper because you're talking to the decision maker right away. You're talking to the boss. That's because that's who you're interviewing. So now you can imply yourself and pitch yourself your own services or products that you'd be able to sell to them or to their business or somebody that might know. So there's multiple ways that you can, monetize a podcast. It's not strictly through ads. And we just got done with a big podcast conference on Friday. Right. There's a lot of ways you'd be able to monetize your podcast with big or small audience.
Okay. Well, that's great. If it's okay with you, I'll put a link to your webinar in the show notes.
Absolutely.
I'd like to get this episode out in about a week, I think. Yeah. Just based on the list. So.
Yeah, it's March 31st at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I understand a lot of people might be working in the morning, so that's why I want to make it a more convenient time. Connect with Romina.com/webinar. It's free, you guys. I'll make sure to keep the webinar open for everybody to, like, the last question get answered. Because this way, before somebody start investing on a podcast, I definitely want to make sure that they can, learn some, how to monetize it, some very important lessons from podcasting that you're not going to be able to find it through a Google search.
Right. Okay. That sounds great. So, how do you use sales skills in daily life? Why should everybody really become better at sales, even if they're not in a sales job directly?
So, very good question. One of the examples that how I was able to use sales, for example, just earlier this morning, I had to call my phone provider because I wanted to purchase a new phone. And I created a really great icebreaker with a sales agent on the other line. I was able to build a connection with them. And I was able to negotiate and use some of the tactics to get a new phone for free because They wanted to charge me the activation fee or they wanted me to charge me the shipping and, extend my contract. Well, I was able to waive all those fees because I created that amazing relationship with them. And I was able to use sales tactics, sales professional to sales professional. So even on easy, errands like that in my daily life, I use sales all the time. But not only that, but even in my career, by using sales, you start thinking, like, it's kind of weird because my brain now goes in a funnel. Because on the funnel, in my mind, it's leads, decision makers, pitches, and sales. So everything in my brain right now is through a funnel that I think of, okay, I need to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 to get to this. So what if something doesn't go right? What am I missing in which bracket? And what do I need to fix to even fix my mindset or fix the way I'm thinking towards a situation? Because it just builds such a strong mindset for you that also you start taking things not personal. You start taking things as, okay, well, like, what can I learn from this? Where am I stuck? What do I need to change? So you put the arrow towards yourself and you don't put it towards somebody else. So it's really great towards growth for your personality as well.
Right. Makes sense. So you talk about the burn the boats mindset. What is that? What's the burn the boats mindset?
Burn the boats for me is not looking back whenever I moved here at 17 by myself.
Yeah.
I burned the boats. There was no going back. No matter how many times I cried, I had a teddy bear that I used to hug every night and just kind of go to sleep with a teddy bear. No matter how homesick I got, I had a decision in my mind. I left Albania. at 17 years old by myself because I wanted a better life and I had to look forward. There was no going back. So that's the perception of burning the boats. Or whenever you make that leap of faith, whenever you make that step, there's no plan B. You burn the boat. You're going to make this plan work no matter what. It's good to re-strategize. So re-strategizing and rethinking everything and changing, strategy towards your process. It's necessary a lot of times, but it's not going with a plan B. It's you knowing for a fact you're going to make it work. You're going to burn the boats. There's no going back. And you're just going to make this work. Once you mentally have burned the boats yourself, then you're going to fully dive in and give 100% of yourself, that being on a new career, that being you finishing school by working full time, for example, or that being you finishing that book this weekend because that book is going to help you on your interview next week or anything that nature. That's what burning the boats mentality is for me.
Yeah, and you're a great example of that. Leaving your country and your family and your friends at the age of 17 is pretty amazing. It's an amazing story, and it's been a success for you. So that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You have a website, and you have a course called Sales Law of Averages. It's an online course. Tell us about the course and how people can find the course.
Absolutely. So if you want to connect with me anywhere, it's Connect with Romina. It's kind of cheesy, but it's the easiest way you can do so. And Romina is spelled Romina. So even my website is connectwithromina.com. The course can be found there under the courses tab. So connectwithromina.com/courses. And the sales course that we actually do, it's exactly kind of going over the leads, decision makers, pitches, and sales. There's over 40 lessons in there. Overall, it's like 5, almost 6 hours of training material, which comes with an ebook because a lot of us want to take notes. I didn't want to write an ebook, and everybody process things differently. Like I might sit here and give a 1 hour lecture. What you took from it and what I took from it is very different because we all process differently. So I wanted to allow my students to process things on their own. So this way they can just write notes on their own, everything. And at the end of it, it also breaks down movie negotiation scenes. So this way you can kind of see to practice and play to all the tactics that I cover throughout the funnels and what you'll be able to do, see it in real life of movie negotiation scenes, because my mind is stamped now. Like whenever I see situations or whenever I see acquisitions or whenever I see like anything like, negotiating on sales, like I break it down, like you use this tactic, you didn't do good at it. Maybe you should change it like this. Right. So that's what the sales course will be able to teach you. I actually played this with a big insurance company, and they'll be able to see a higher on their cross sales, also on their conversion overall. So it's a really, successful course that I've been teaching one-on-one so far, and I decided to bring it to a bigger audience through just an online sales course platform.
Excellent. Romina, you've got a great story. I really appreciate your time this morning, telling our audience about your fascinating story and some good tips and tactics for sales and negotiation. So I'll put a link in the show notes to your course, and hopefully people will check that out.
Absolutely, yes. And if it can help with anything, feel more than free to reach out. I'm very approachable. You will get a reply from me right away.
Excellent. That's true. I did that myself, and you did reply right away. So that's awesome. Thank you very much again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.